Welcome back to Be Master 79. In this lesson, we take one ielts speaking task card all the way through part 2 and part 3. You will see the 1 minute of note-taking, a full 2-minute answer, and 4 developed part 3 responses, all written to Band 9 standard. Part 2. The long turn. First, the shape of part 2. The examiner gives you a task card, a pencil and paper. You have exactly 1 minute to prepare, and you should use every second of it. You then speak for 1 to 2 minutes without interruption. If the examiner stops you at 2 minutes, that is completely normal and it is not a penalty. Here is the card exactly as it is printed. Describe a problem you had while shopping online or in a store. You should say when it happened, what you bought, and what problems you had while shopping, and explain how you felt about it. One thing worth flagging before we plan. The heading on this card says a problem, singular, but the third prompt says what problems you had, plural. We are showing you the card exactly as printed rather than quietly fixing it. The safe strategy is to build your talk around one main problem and let 2 or 3 knock-on problems come out of it. That answers both versions at once. Now the 1 minute of preparation. This is the part most candidates waste. Write keywords, never sentences, because you cannot read from a page and still sound natural. Take the prompts in the order they are printed. Choose one specific incident with a date attached, and if you can, choose one with a deadline in it because time pressure generates content for free. Here is what 1 minute of notes actually looks like. 8 months ago, the run-up to a wedding, which gives us a deadline. Leather ankle boots in a flash sale, bought on impulse. Then the problems, layered, delayed dispatch, the wrong size, a scuff on the toe, a chatbot loop, and being told to pay the return postage. And finally the feelings, which have to move, not just sit still. Before we speak, here is how the 2 minutes is shaped. 15 seconds to set the scene, 20 seconds on what you bought and why, 35 seconds on the main problem and the knock-on problems, 25 seconds on the hardest part, getting it resolved, and the last 25 seconds for graded feelings, the resolution, and a 1-line takeaway you can land on. Here is the full Band 9 answer in 4 parts. Listen for the past narrative tenses and the very specific detail.
I'd like to talk about a fairly frustrating experience I had roughly 8 months ago in the run-up to my cousin's wedding. What I bought was a pair of leather ankle boots from a well-known online retailer. I'd been eyeing them for weeks, and when they finally dropped to about half price in a flash sale, I ordered them on the spot. The trouble started almost immediately. The website listed them as being in stock, but 3 days later I got an email saying the order had been delayed indefinitely. That was annoying, but manageable. What made it worse was that when the parcel finally turned up, nearly 2 weeks late, they'd sent the wrong size. I'd ordered a 38 and they'd packed a 41. On top of that, one boot had a scuff across the toe, so it clearly wasn't a fresh pair. Then came a real headache getting my money back. There was no phone number anywhere on the site, only a chatbot that kept looping me back to the same help article. I wrote 3 separate emails over 10 days before an actual human replied, and even then they insisted I pay the return postage myself, which I thought was pretty cheeky given the mistake was entirely theirs. As for how I felt, I was livid at first, mostly because the wedding was looming and I'd left myself no time to find an alternative. But what irritated me more than the wrong boots was feeling like I was shouting into a void. Being kept in the dark is far more infuriating than the mistake itself. It did work out. They refunded me in full and threw in a voucher, but by then I'd bought something else in a physical shop. If anything, the whole saga taught me to check a returns policy before I click buy, not after.
That is the complete answer on one screen so you can study the shape of it. Notice that the emotion is graded rather than flat, and notice the final sentence, which lands cleanly whether or not the examiner stops you. These are the part 2 phrases worth stealing. Learn them as whole chunks, with the grammar attached, not as isolated words. Part 3. The discussion. Now part 3. This lasts 4 to 5 minutes and it is a discussion, not a monologue. The questions move away from your own life towards society in general. The examiner may push back on what you say, and that is an opportunity, not a trap. Aim for 3 to 5 developed sentences each time. Question 1. What kind of service do you think is good? Here is the plan before the answer. Name the criteria, then rank them: competence, scripted, friendliness, the real test, behavior when things go wrong, qualify it, resolution speed beats response speed.
For me, good service comes down to three things, and the first is competence. The staff actually know the product rather than reading off a screen. The second is being treated like an adult, no scripted enthusiasm and no upselling something I've clearly said I don't want. But the one that really separates good from mediocre is how company behaves when something goes wrong. Anyone can be pleasant when a transaction runs smoothly. The real test is whether they take ownership of a mistake without making you fight for it. I'd also add that I value speed of resolution over speed of response. I'd far rather wait a day for someone who can actually fix a problem than get an instant reply from a bot that can't.
Question 2. What are the differences between shopping online and in stores? Here is the plan before the answer. Concede the obvious differences first, briefly, then offer a more interesting angle, sensory third angle, how each handles complaints, close on a social dimension, not purely transactional.
The obvious differences are convenience and price. Online, you can compare a dozen retailers in minutes and you aren't restricted to opening hours. But I think the more interesting distinction is a sensory one. In a shop, you can feel the fabric, judge the weight of something, and try it on, whereas online, you're essentially buying a photograph and a description, which is why return rates for clothing are so much higher. There's also a difference in how the two handle problems. In a store, you can put the item on the counter and speak to a human face to face, while online, you're usually funneled into a ticketing system. And socially, they are not equivalent either. For a lot of people, especially older shoppers, going to the shops is partly an outing rather than a purely transactional errand.
Question 3. What problems do customers often have while shopping? Here is the plan before the answer. Impose a structure, pre-purchase vs post-purchase, 2 or 3 concrete examples in each half, contrast with physical shop complaints, finish with the underlying cause, transparency.
Broadly, I'd split them into pre-purchase and post-purchase problems.
Before buying, the commonest complaints are misleading descriptions, hidden charges that only appear at the checkout, and sizing that varies wildly between brands. Afterwards, it tends to be delayed or lost deliveries, faulty goods, and the sheer difficulty of reaching someone with the authority to resolve it. In physical shops, the complaints are different: long queues, understaffed floors, or assistants who can't answer a straightforward question. I'd say the underlying issue in both cases is a lack of transparency. Customers don't mind a problem nearly as much as they mind not being told what's being done about it.
Question 4. What do you think customers should do when there are problems with the products they bought online? Here is the plan before the answer. Sequence the advice document, contact, escalate, be specific, photograph, screenshot in writing, add a legal angle, consumer rights, cooling off period, end with a judgment, reviews as a last resort.
The first thing is to document everything. Photograph the item on arrival, keep the packaging, and screenshot the original listing because descriptions do get quietly edited. Then contact the seller in writing rather than by phone, so there's a record, and state clearly what you want: a refund, a replacement, or repair. If that goes nowhere, most countries have consumer protection legislation that gives you a cooling off period, so it's worth knowing your rights before you escalate. Beyond that, a chargeback through your bank or card provider is often far more effective than another email. And I'd leave a public review as a last resort rather than a first move. It feels satisfying, but a calm, well-documented complaint usually gets results faster.
And the part 3 phrases. Notice how many of them are structural. They organize an argument rather than just describe a thing. A word on what Band 9 actually means in speaking. Fluency and coherence, speaking at length without noticeable effort and developing topics fully. Lexical resourceful flexibility, with idiomatic language used naturally. Grammatical range and accuracy, a wide range with full flexibility, where any errors are rare sips. And pronunciation, effortless to understand throughout. Please note the caveat on screen. Band 9 here is our own quality assessment against the publicly available band descriptors. It is not a certified examiner score. Your challenge. Take the same card but change the object and change the deadline. Record yourself once without notes and check 3 things. Did you name one main problem? Did your feelings move? And did you land your last sentence? Post your attempt in the comments. If this helped, subscribe to Master 79 and I will see you in the next lesson.